They was not scared of Suge Knight. They was terrified of Suge Knight.
Right.
I mean, terrified.
I know.
No. To death.
To death.
When you hear the name Suge Knight, you think of intimidation, fear, and domination. You simply know this cigar-smoking bearded man is someone you don't want to mess with. And in the West Coast, during the golden age of hip-hop, Suge Knight ran the streets and the studios simultaneously. Suge was the man in the streets and the man that brought the heat. He ran a label that had Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and even Tupac. But surprisingly, there was a younger rapper who was never scared of Suge Knight, and he even stood up to him. I am talking about a man who was shot 9 times and somehow still survived. This is the story of why 50 Cent never feared Suge Knight. The gangster and the executive. If you go through Suge Knight's Wikipedia page, the very first sentence describes him as a former record executive and convicted felon. You won't find those words side by side often, but for Suge, it fits perfectly. Suge began his career as a concert promoter and bodyguard for various celebrities, but after some time, he decided he wanted to kick things up a notch. So in 1989, Suge took the plunge and began his music publishing company. And as a businessman, Suge's motto is simple. You either do what he wants, or he visits you with a strap in his hand or uses other physical means to get what he wants. His mentality is money-orientated. Suge once stated that he wanted everything and nothing would stop him. And the first example of how Suge handles business is how he dealt with the problem he had with Vanilla Ice. Suge's client, Mario Johnson, had helped write Vanilla Ice's smash hit Ice Ice Baby, and Suge wanted a slice of the profits that were coming in from the song. So he visited Vanilla Ice in his Beverly Hills hotel, and it was time to pay the boogeyman. He arrived with 6 men, and they roughed up Ice's entourage. Then Suge took him to the balcony of the room and threatened to throw him off the 15th floor balcony.
Suge took me out on the balcony, started talking to me personally. On the balcony, high above, like 15 floors. He had me look over the edge, show me how high I was up there.
You're scared?
I needed to wear a diaper on that day. I was very scared.
And what happened next? Vanilla Ice agreed to pay royalties to Suge's client. And after this, the next step for Suge is to start his own label and create a dynasty. Suge met with the rapper The Doc, who wanted to get out of his deal with Ruthless Records. And through Doc, Suge met with various members of the NWA. And this was when he was informed that Dr. Dre wanted to leave NWA and his label as well. And once again, Suge came through by doing things his own way. According to NWA manager Jerry Heller, Suge Knight and his goons threatened him and Eazy-E with lead pipes and baseball bats to force them to release Dre and Doc from their contracts. Once again, Suge Knight succeeded. All these victories solidified his street cred as the man not to mess with and the man who got things done. And in 1999, Suge, Doc, and Dre co-founded Death Row Records.
Death Row's in the house!
Death Row can be bigger than Motown, or Sony, or Warner Brothers.
Death Row's gonna be the biggest record company there is.
The master plan was to take over the world.
Suge stated that he wanted Death Row Records to be the Motown of the 1990s. And he did achieve his goal. He got a distribution deal with Interscope Records and built a label that became the envy of many. Death Row released some of the greatest albums in the history of rap. You can't talk about gangster rap or tell the story of hip-hop without talking about Suge's label. Under Death Row Records, Dr. Dre released the iconic album The Chronic in December 1992. And if you thought Death Row couldn't create another classic, well, think again. A year later, another rapper under Death Row who goes by the name Snoop Dogg released his own album, and it was another instant classic. Doggy Style was released in November 1993, and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart. In 1995, after Tupac had spent 8 months out of his 3-year sentence for a sexual assault charge, Suge Knight settled Tupac's $1.4 million bond. And in return, Tupac signed with Death Row Records. Pac then released his own classic, All Eyes on Me, in February 1996. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, and all this success was achieved in a space of 6 years. At this point, Death Row was making over $100 million a year. And as death row continued to rake in the Benjamins, Suge Knight became even more violent and powerful. According to Corrupt, Suge ruled the label with an iron fist. And for any error, there were dire consequences. Like beating an employee before sitting on him in the bathroom, or making another employee drink the urine of everyone in the room. These incidents contributed to Suge being known as the most feared man in hip-hop during this period. And apart from punishing his employees who made a mistake, Suge also has various run-ins with the law. In 1995, he was sentenced to 5 years probation for assaulting 2 rappers at a recording studio back in 1992. Suge wasn't just having problems with his laws, he was also dissing other label execs whenever he had the chance.
Any artist out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the video, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
In 1996, Suge was sentenced to jail again. He violated his probation when he, Tupac, and their entourage attacked a Crip member, Orlando Anderson. He was sentenced to 9 years for violating his probation but was released after 4 years. But that wouldn't be the last time he was sentenced to prison. In 2003, he violated his parole again when he beat up a parking lot attendant. By now, Suge and his label have become known for violence. Suge is affiliated with the mob Peru Bloods, and many of the people he hired for his label were actual gangsters. This was why Dr. Dre decided to leave the label in 1996. Dre started a label known as Aftermath Records. He signed the man who ended up becoming hip-hop's best-selling artist of all time. Dr. Dre's Aftermath label had now become Death Row's biggest competition. And Dre's label even became bigger when they signed a young rapper from South Jamaica, Queens, Curtis James Jackson. When Suge Knight met 50 Cent. In 2002, Eminem heard 50 Cent's Guess Who's Back mixtape and recognized his potential. M signed him to Shady Records, a subsidiary of Dre's Aftermath label. And after 50 got signed, he made sure everyone never forgot his name. 50 Cent went on to become one of the biggest artists of the early 2000s. His album Get Rich or Die Tryin' debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart and has since been certified 9 times platinum. 50's album also had hits like 21 Questions, Many Men, Patiently Waiting, and In Day Club. And it was while shooting the iconic video for In Da Club that Suge Knight decided to holler at 50 Cent. When Suge Knight arrived at 50 Cent's video shoot, he was not alone. He arrived in typical Suge Knight fashion. Suge arrived in a way that he didn't need to announce his arrival for anyone to know he was around. According to various sources, Suge arrived at the video set with about 30 Mexicans.
Yeah, like I was like, what happened? I remember the time, actually, it was funny because he came, it was like, Suge's outside, Suge's outside. Everybody like, it was running, dropping shit, like, man, everybody going, I'm in front of the camera like.
And after he showed up, most of the cast and crew members started running in different directions. The only man not running was 50 Cent. When 50 and Suge Knight eventually came face to face, 50 said to him, "What's up, man? What you want to do?" This shows that 50 wasn't scared of the boogeyman of the West Coast. Some reports even state that 50 had gone to his car to get an Uzi to help protect himself before walking up to him. When 50 eventually spoke to him, Suge looked at him, took a drag of his cigar, and left.
And I just remember smurfing 50. 50 was like, "What's up, man? What you want to do?"
Bang him.
Yeah, Bang was like, what you want to do? And Suge looked at him, and he took a puff of his cigar, and he blew it out, and he did like this, and he left.
This will turn out to be the only encounter between Suge Knight and 50 Cent, but it's a clear example of how 50 was never intimidated or scared of him. Whilst other people were hiding because they were scared of Suge, 50 stood his ground and was never intimidated. And his courage is perhaps the reason why Suge Knight never disturbed him again.